Hey everybody, this is Russ Carson Jr., one of the genealogists here at Family Tree Nuts, and I'm here in Pickaway County, Ohio, and this is a very big treat, one of the biggest and most anticipated video projects that we've ever done, but I'm here with my own Grandma Carson, the matriarch of our family, the Carson number one, the hero to us all, the one, and the reason that we're all here. So, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, Grandma?
Violet Carson.
Violet Ruth Carson. And when were you born, Grandma?
December the 19th, 1934.
Christmas baby, 1934. So I guess that means that just a few weeks you have a big birthday.
Right, I'll be 85.
85 years old. And Grandma, that means that you have seen a lot of things that have happened over the years, but you've won some kind of a prize too. Tell them about the prize that you've won because of your age.
Well, because I'm the only one.
Right. Nobody in your family has...
That I know of that has lived to be that old.
Not of anybody, grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, anybody, right?
I mean, there might be cousins that I don't know about, but the immediate family, none of them lived that long.
So nobody lived to 85. Now you're pretty healthy and your mind's just perfectly clear, and we're all so lucky to have you. But what do you attribute that to? What do you attribute to living up into your 80s?
I guess just good living.
Good living? What do you mean by good living?
I guess I wasn't wild. I didn't drink, didn't smoke. Lived in the biggest part of my life in the country. And
good country air?
Yeah.
Did you said didn't drink, didn't smoke, but and good food, right? I think that's one thing that you're known for in our family is everybody is known as being the great cook, and everybody has their something that they like the best from Grandma, and mine is fried chicken that you make. So everybody in our house loves your fried chicken, and I've tried to emulate that myself, but I just can't get it the way you do it. But
no, I don't do anything special about it.
But you're definitely known for your cooking skills, for sure. So, something else that you're known for, and is this right here? These blankets. I think this is actually a blanket that you made yourself, isn't it?
Yes, I think so.
And this was what the coolest thing is you have made this blanket for how many blankets have you made? Do you think?
No, I have no idea. One for each child and grandchild and great grandchild,
and even in our wives and things too. So
right.
She's made a personal blanket for us all, and I think that's an incredible legacy. That something that we're always going to have of our grandma. It's personalized, and you make it to our favorite colors most of the time, or something that has something to do with them, and we all have them. And it's something that is going to last. I mean, these blankets will be around 100 years or more even, kind of thing, our entire lives. So I have one on my own chair that wrap it up, and I feel like it's a little bit of Grandma's love because of all the love that she's made, put into making these blankets. And it's definitely a cherished possession that we all have. But so Grandma, you were born in 1934, and that is a pivotal point in American history because you were born right in the middle of the Great Depression. So when you were a young girl, it was the United States was under economic duress and things. Do you remember about people being poor when you were young?
No, I didn't know. I guess we were poor, but didn't know we were poor.
But pretty much everybody was poor.
Yeah.
Not everybody, but a large portion of the United States was under a Great Depression.
Well, people had ration stamps, and you had to use them to buy stuff, and once you used them up, you couldn't buy. If you needed something, you couldn't buy it till you got the stamps again.
What are some of the things that were rationed?
Well, like sugar and gasoline. Of course, we didn't have a car, so we didn't have that. And
I think you said even clothing.
Yeah, the clothing was.
Now, was this during World War II or even before then?
Well, it was World War II.
Right. I remember.
But I don't know if everything was rationed, but I know that your main things were. And if, like it was sugar, if you used up your sugar, then you had to wait till I don't know how often they got the stamps, but you had to wait till you got issued stamps again.
Speaking of World War II, you were a little girl. I guess you were only about 10, 11 years old when the war ended.
Yeah.
So some of your first memories would be about the war. What do you remember about World War II?
Well, otherwise, and I remember when it was open, we had, like I was telling you earlier, about the newsboy going up and down the street hollering extra, extra, read all about it, and he had newspapers where you could buy them off of him, where they had the headlines that the war was ended.
And
but they only done that when it was something special going on.
Do you remember when the war ended? Like, is that a moment that you remember?
No, not really.
Okay. You were a little girl, and really none of your relatives, close relatives, were fighting over there. So
no.
At the time, so I think you told me too during movies and such. You went to go see movies that they would break in with some news stories and.
Well, in between your shows, a lot of times was westerns when you went on the weekend, and they were like serials that you watched so much of it, and then to see what happened, it was like a cliffhanger, and you had to go the next week to see what happened. If you couldn't go, then you don't know what happened to your characters.
Huh.
It's like your shows you watch on television now. You watch them every week, but they're different shows. But those was continued, and more or less like you done a break in a movie, and then you watch part of it one week, and you go back next week to watch the rest of it. And then there might be another movie. But in between them, they always had what they called newsreels, and that's where they put the pictures of the war and stuff like that on.
Right. Right. I remember you telling me, this was, about your grandfather. One of the stories about. Well, first of all, how much was a movie theater to go to the movie back then?
If I remember, 10 cents.
10 cents. What about? There was another place that was a quarter. Where's that at?
Downtown Columbus at the Palace Theater or the Hyatt Theater.
So if you went downtown, it was 25 cents. But if you went to the regular movie theater,
it was 10.
And what movie theater did you go to?
You mean downtown?
No, the one you went to that was 10 cents. So it was on East Main or something, or?
It was on East Main, but I don't know what the name of it was.
Right. I think it's still standing there now.
Might have been the Drexel.
Okay.
But I'm not real sure.
And how did you get the? Tell us about how you got tickets to go to the movie theater.
Well, Grandpa was what they called a junker. He went around and picked up scrap metal and stuff like that to sell it, I guess, to make extra money.
That wasn't his full-time job. It was an extra thing he did.
And he also collected newspapers. And when they had a paper drive, the government or something for it, if you had a handful of papers, then you could get in for free. So he distributed whatever grandkids lived with him or was around. He gave us all newspapers so we could get in.
So you get a fistful of newspapers, got you a movie ticket. So
right.
I thought that was a pretty neat story right there. Was the movies in color?
No. The only way you saw colors if you went downtown.
Okay, so you had to go downtown to see those color videos. Do you remember your first colored movie?
I'm not sure. I remember going down there and watching Tarzan, but I don't know whether that was the first one.
Tarzan, yeah, pretty neat. Now I know what is your first memory as a little girl? What was the first thing that you can remember?
No, I really don't know.
I think you told me you remember vaguely that when your father was passing away.
Well, yeah. I remember when he was bedridden. He had scarlet fever, and his bed was set up by the picture window, and people from the church could come up and visit him on the porch, but they couldn't come in because we was under quarantine.
Quarantine because he had scarlet fever, and that was 1939.
Right.
So let's talk a little bit about your father. His name was Walter Carson, and he was born there in Washington County, or was it Meigs?
Washington.
County, and his family had moved up and down the river a little bit, East Liverpool, down in Meigs County, and had lived there for at least 3 generations. They originally come from Virginia and Maryland, but he you don't know a whole lot about his parents and such, because he was a younger child, and but he passed away when you were just a little girl, and I think he was a minister, right?
Yeah.
What are some of the other things that he did too?
He worked with the American Legion, and he had a soup kitchen. But that's just stuff I was told, not that I actually remember.
Sure, right. And so your father, Walter Carson, was actually in the Army twice on 2 separate occasions. He was in during World War I, but he was also in a few years before that too on an enlistment. And I know that one of the neatest things that I found about it is I found a newspaper article about him on his first enlistment when he was back home visiting his mother, I think in East Liverpool. And it says that he was a basketball star on the base basketball team, which I thought that was pretty cool, being an athlete myself. I even saw at Fort Thomas, where he was stationed in his second enlistment, where he played basketball too. I've been and visited that and done a video there too. But that was a neat little story about him. But we know he was a minister. He was a preacher, ran a soup kitchen, and he had multiple letters of recommendation that you still have. I think you've got, 30 or 40 of those letters of recommendation about him. But he, of course, he had, there was 3 of you girls, and their names are, who were the names of the girls? Yourself and
Naoma, who growed up to be called Pokey, and then Janie.
Naomi was Pokey, so her nickname was Pokey. How did she get that nickname?
I really don't know. Otherwise, and they said where she was always slow, and they called her Pokey.
And there was another reason too, I think you said, that your mom's friend?
Well, she said something about she looked no more than where she was little, I guess. Said she was no bigger than a little pork chop or something like
poke
that.
Chop, you said, I think so.
Yeah, poke chop.
I thought that was a neat story right there. But so it was Pokey, and she was born of March of 36, and then there was your other sister, Frances Jane, going by Janie. And when was she born? 36? No,
39.
39, right before. So, and then in 1939, your father got scarlet fever and passed away.
Right.
So after your father passed, what happened to you? Where did you guys go then?
To Columbus to live with her mom and dad.
Okay.
Marion and Ethel Bellamy.
Okay. And let's talk about them for just a moment. Marion and Ethel Tipton Bellamy. Marion had an interesting nickname. What was his nickname?
Bun or something like that.
Yeah, Bun. But that was a pretty. So whenever I'm doing research, I find him as Bun. People referred to him as Bun, not Marion. So we don't really know where that nickname came from. But they actually get a little quick backstory on them. They were from down here in Monroe County, Pickaway County, where they were born, and that's interesting because Grandma didn't know that until later on, and her and her sister Pokey ended up moving right down to the same area that their grandparents had lived. So Grandma and her sister Pokey moved down to Pickaway County also and lived. But their parents were farmers, and they eventually moved to Circleville. And Marion or Bun had a couple of his brothers that passed away, I think in 1908, within just a few months of each other, of the mumps. And by 1910, they had moved to Columbus, where his father, Bernard, was a cement contractor, and Marion worked with them. And then in 1920 and 1930, shows up he was what's a cool job as a streetcar operator, streetcar motorman. He ran a streetcar there in Columbus, Ohio. So pretty neat little story right there. But by 1940, all of you were living in the same house. And that was the height of the Depression right then. That on the census shows up, of course, Mary and his wife Ethel, your grandma, and then 3 of his children, and then your mother and 3 girls, and then also her sister and her husband and her couple girls. I think there's 16 or 17 of you that are all living in the same house. And I think that's a neat story because that is a snapshot of the Great Depression right there, when families had all come together. At times were tough financially all over, and they were all coming together. And I think that says a lot about your grandparents to allow everybody to come into their house. And that's when they lived on Leffler, I think, right?
Right.
Or Rich Street, or right in there on the east side. But that was an awesome story. But they didn't live there long. Your mom eventually got a job, and very soon after that, and got on her own feet, got her own place. And what are some places that she worked at?
Well, she worked at Kroger's.
Kroger's is a grocery store.
And then I think that's when, from Kroger's, then she must have got the job with the government.
Okay.
And I want to say it's Curtis Wright, but I don't think that's right. She'd worked there so many years, and then they went out to California for a year, and then they come back, and then she went and applied for her job back, and she couldn't get on at the original place, but she got on as what they called now as DCSC. And she finished working there until, I think it was 77, 78 that she retired. That she had her 25 years in.
Okay, so, and we didn't even introduce her name. Her name was Vivian Jane Bellamy Carson Shaw, which we're going to talk about that in a second. But she was born, I think, in 1915 or 1914, and she was born in Columbus, Ohio, and she pretty much lived almost her entire life there. And she passed away in 85 or 86.
I think 86.
But she, I think she worked at Kroger's, you said. And what was the neat thing about working at Kroger's? What was one of the bennies that, or one of the benefits that she had when she worked at the grocery store?
Well, I just think their employees was allowed to have stuff that was going to be discarded if it was still good, that they couldn't sell it anymore. I mean, I don't know for sure, but I'm assuming that's what happened.
And at the end of the Depression, that would have been a nice Benny, I guess, kind of thing. So, I think you said you didn't, during the Depression, you didn't realize that you were poor, kind of thing like that. But everybody was pretty poor during that time. But, what's one of the things you said you always had?
We always had plenty of food.
Always had plenty to eat. That was a big deal. What was one of your favorite things that you ate when you were a girl?
I don't think I had any favorite thing.
Was there anything that you didn't like?
No.
What about candy or anything like that? Snacks. What was one of your favorite snacks as a child?
Well, we didn't have what you call snack food like they do now.
Didn't exist, right? Little Debbie's and.
No, they didn't have stuff like that.
But candy bars. Was there a certain candy bar you always enjoyed, or?
No.
Tootsie Rolls or any of that kind of stuff?
Nope, I don't remember having them.
But, all right.
I remember when margarine come out, margarine used to be white. And you eventually got a little pill with it. And you took your margarine and let it more or less get at room temperature, and then you had to mix that pill in it to make it yellow. And Mom used to let us girls mix it like you was playing with clay or something like that until you got it all mixed.
Why would you want it yellow?
Well, I guess that was just the thing.
Okay.
Because it looked too much like lard when you...
Oh, I see.
And see, lard was... They didn't... Like you have Crisco now. Well, back then, everything was lard.
Okay. Let's go talk about your mother a little bit more. You said she worked for the DCSC. DCSC, which... Defense Contractors Supply Center, something like that. But she did work for, 25 years, I think you said, and she retired. And towards the end of her career, what was her job?
Yeah, I guess she was a secretary to one of the head colonel or something like that.
Secretary to the colonel. So she spent 25 years working for the supply center for the Department of Defense. So in my opinion...
Well, she didn't work 25 years there. Well,
right.
When she was at the other place, I don't know how many years she was there.
But it was all part of the military.
Well, she came back, when she went to DCSC, it was in 63.
Right.
And then she retired, and I know it was after you was born, because it was 2 or 3 years after I started to work where I worked at in '74, and so I think it was about '77 or '78 that she retired.
But and in my opinion, in working 25 years for the Department of Defense, I think she's really
Right.
done her part and done her service as much as a lot of military service members have. So I think that's definitely something that's a legacy and something to be proud of too. And then when you were a little girl, you remember you were talking about what are some of the things that is not the same now that's not the same now that he did back then. Like what you said, he had some things delivered. What was delivered to you guys when you were a girl?
Oh, yeah, in the summertime we had ice delivered. We always had milk delivered, but it was always in the bottles. In the wintertime, if you wasn't home to take it in, it would freeze, and you had your cream on the top of it, and the cream would come up out of the bottle.
Oh my gosh!
And then you had the paper cap on it, and it would always be right there on it.
Did you shake it back up? Did you mix it back up, or
Yeah.
let it thaw out? Okay.
Well, every time you was going to use the milk, you wanted to shake it up anyhow, so the cream would be mixed up with it. But I think some of the people probably took that cream off of it if they wanted to make whipped cream or something.
Oh, neat. That's a neat
I
thing.
don't know that my mom did, but I know that people did.
And you said the Iceman came, and what the Iceman put? You didn't have a refrigerator. We had a.
What you call an ice box.
And for those that don't know what that is, what is an ice box?
Well, it was just a wooden cupboard-like thing, and the lid lifted up, and that's where they put the ice in there. And then you had a pan underneath it, because that ice melted, and you had to keep that emptied every day. If you didn't, it'd run over all over the place.
And I think you said that you used there was a sign that you guys would put out.
Right.
It was color-coded, like for what? What was the purpose of the sign?
To say what size block of ice you wanted, either a 50 or a 75 or a 100-pound. It's whatever, I guess, would fit in your ice box.
So you'd set your sign out there. The man would know which size piece of ice to bring, and he'd come to your door and come in and put the ice in there. Was that a daily thing, or
No.
every few days?
I don't know how often he came,
But
it would have melted pretty fast. So.
I think you told me a story too about the Iceman. You said that they would give you like little chips.
Yeah, the kids that sat on the street when the Iceman was there, he was always allowed to get, chips off of him.
That had to be pretty neat because, you didn't have air conditioning back then, it got pretty hot.
No.
And you had to be outside
I don't even
playing.
remember having fans.
Right. And I think that you said you didn't use the icebox in the winter. Why didn't you use the icebox in the wintertime?
Because he put a orange crate outside the window, and you just opened the window and put stuff out there. I imagine, people might have had refrigerators, but we didn't.
Right. So that's pretty ingenuitive. You just set it out there and have when you needed a glass of milk, you open the window, grab your glass of milk, pour your glass of milk, and put it back out the window.
Well, I think we lived in a furnished apartment, so apparently it didn't come with.
Okay.
Because I think when we moved from there and was in the next apartment, I think it must have had a refrigerator because we never had the Iceman there.
Sure.
And then we lived in a one room, so I guess we must have really been poor because I don't know what happened. That there was 5 of us in one room. You had 2 beds, and then you had a little table. And you didn't have no bathroom. There were people that had the apartment behind us. You had to go through their apartment to get to just a toilet. You didn't have no tub or anything like that. There was like a closet that was off of your room. The curtain was up to it, and that's how you took a pan of water and done a bath like that.
And you didn't live there very long, I don't think, though, right? That would have been mid-40s, late 40s?
Yeah, we might have lived there about a year. I don't know.
Okay.
And
that was when your mother was remarried.
Yeah.
Okay.
And she worked. That was where it was over top of Kroger's where she worked at.
Perfect.
And then we moved and got a house that it was in the low-income housing projects or whatever they wanted to call them. And I know I was 15 then,
Okay.
and we had a regular bedroom and upstairs and downstairs.
So I remember, it wasn't very long after, your father had passed. A few years later on, your mom met another guy, and what was his name?
Otho Shaw.
Otho Shaw, and I think he was also a minister part-time, or
Right.
and he was from down in Athens County, I think it was. So
Yeah.
when they first got married, you guys moved down there to Athens County, and what are some of your memories of living down there when you were a little girl?
Well, my sister and I, we used to pick up coal along the road so they could use it in the coal stove.
And it was a coal mining community.
And there was a creek that ran right beside the house, and we used to wade in there and catch the crawdads.
Oh, yeah?
And I used to love going up the side of the hill, and they had wildflowers and stuff. I used to love to do that.
And you were probably, 7, 8, 9 years old about this time?
Something like that.
Something like that. And I think you remember you went to a school there. Tell us about your school.
It was a one-room school. I don't know whether it was either up to 5th grade or 8th grade. But I know I was supposed to be at the head of the class there, but when we moved from there, I wasn't the head of no class when we got into the city living.
When you moved back to Columbus.
Because I remember we went to Chillicothe first, and Pokey was one grade under me, and the grade I was in, it was either the 3rd grade, something like that, and they had this book, Through the Green Gate, and I couldn't read it. So they demoted me back to Pokey's class, and back then you had to move your whole desk.
Oh, wow.
It was all one piece, and you moved it all down the hall, and they moved me in her room. It was very embarrassing.
Right. Yeah, I guess so. That's a little different than nowadays for sure.
And the teacher was really rough. If the kids got caught chewing gum, they had to stand in front of the class and put the gum on their nose.
Oh, my gosh.
And
tell me about, tell us about, you had that one teacher, you asked him how to spell a certain word.
I asked him how to spell beautiful, and he just commented back, well, how could a beautiful girl like you not know how to spell beautiful? And to this day, when I see that word, I often think of him.
That's awesome.
And
that's because you are beautiful, right?
Well, I didn't think so, but that just made an impression with me.
Sure. That's a great story. And so you lived down there for a couple of years, and while you were there, you had a couple other sisters that were born. Carmen Ann, who was raised by her aunt and uncle on your stepdad's side, and then, of course, Charlotte.
Well, Charlotte was born after we moved back up to Columbus.
Okay, all right. And Charlotte, introduce Charlotte to the story. Charlotte is, she's your youngest sibling, and she lived her entire life with your mother.
Right.
She never married or anything like that, but she's kind of like the favorite aunt or an extra grandma to all of us, and she comes to all of our family events, and she's definitely one of the Carsons, I guess, as you'd say, and she's definitely beloved by all. So you moved back to Columbus, and you said that all the kids would play outside. And what are some of the things that the kids would do when you were a kid?
Yeah, they played ball, and they played hopscotch and jump rope. Some of them was lucky to have scooters, and sometimes they made their own scooters out of those orange crates, because the orange crate would be the front, and they put like handles on it, and then you had the board, and then they put a couple wheels on it.
Okay.
And the boys usually had those. But I don't think they have orange crates anymore. They do everything in the cardboard boxes. But people used to make furniture out of the orange crates, like stands by your chair, or they used it for firewood or whatever.
Did you have a favorite game or a favorite? What are the things your favorite thing to do? Or
no, not really.
Cool. And you said the boys played baseball in the street and had to stop for cars to come by and things like that. So, was there a lot of kids in your neighborhood, or was it just a few? Or
just a few.
Okay.
There was enough for them to get out. They probably didn't have enough for like a whole to do bases or stuff. They just got out there and hit the ball back and forth to each other. And
Now, when you were a teenager, what did the kids like to? What did the kids do? Like, what did you do for entertainment, for fun, or?
I didn't do anything.
Well, you did one thing. You remember I asked you, did you ever go roller skating? Tell them about your roller skating story.
No, I don't want to share that.
Basically, wasn't the most graceful, I think, on the roller skates and had to get them off. But
Right.
what are some of that? Did they go to the movies? Was there a hangout place that the kids went to? And
Well, they probably did, but we weren't allowed to.
okay, had pretty strict stepdad there,
Yeah.
kind of thing. But I know that. Tell us the story. I thought was a neat story about your coats in the springtime. You and Pokey had gotten some new coats, or supposed to have your coat on, and
No, it was a girlfriend and my sister and I walked downtown, and Mom told us to make sure we had our coats on.
it was early spring.
Yeah. And we walked down to the courthouse or the state house and was walking around the sidewalk where the state house is. And it just happened a dispatch reporter was out there that day, and they wanted to take a picture of us girls because there we was with no coats on. And we thought that was pretty neat to take our picture, but then it turned out they put it right on the front page of the paper. And of course, then Mother found out we didn't have our coats on.
So you were busted.
Yeah.
Nowadays, you got social media or taking a picture where you're at, or somebody took a picture and you're in the background. Then they posted it. You got busted on the newspaper. So that would have been the early 40s or so, when that maybe mid 40s.
Yeah.
So that picture is out there, and we're going to find that. We're going to find that newspaper. I think you said you found it once, but
I should have it there at home someplace, but I have no idea where it's at.
Yeah, that's pretty neat.
It might be in one of my album books.
Pretty neat story. Do you remember? I think you said, did you guys have a television when you grew up?
No, we didn't have a television till I was 18.
Okay, and you bought that one yourself, I think you said.
Right.
So everyone listened to the radio, and tell us about the radio back then.
Well, everybody sat around whenever your favorite show was on. Everybody sat around it like you do now.
Like
And
watching TV, but you listen to the radio.
but my dad, when we got the television, my dad loved wrestling. But we wasn't allowed to watch it or turn it on until all the house was cleaned first.
Okay.
And then we could sit and watch the wrestling. But I didn't really have any favorite shows then.
What are some of the shows that you listened to on the radio? Do you remember?
No, not
Sure.
not back then. The only thing I remember is we had the wrestling. That was always on Saturday.
Right.
Just like you're with the Buckeyes now.
Okay.
But it was a big time wrestling and stuff like that.
Speaking of the Buckeyes, that's was the Ohio State Buckeyes, was the football, basketball, was all that as big of a deal then as it is now, or is it about the same? Or
Well, I remember when they used to beat Michigan, they used to have the wooden goalpost,
oh wow,
and they tore the stands tore the goalposts out and walked from Ohio State down to Broaden High carrying those goalposts. And I think eventually they put the ones they got like now cemented in so the people couldn't do that.
sure,
But that was a big thing.
right,
But see, we lived in the North End, and so I guess people would go out like a parade, and so you'd see them going down the street. But it was only it was if they won the Michigan game.
oh, that was the main game, right?
And that was when Woody Hayes was there.
Sure.
But I remember that.
So that they were just as much a part of Ohio or Central Ohio culture as they are today, I guess,
Right.
kind of thing. Nothing's changed, even 70, 80 years, kind of thing. It's definitely an identity. I know that you went to school. I think you said that most folks, by the time they got to about 16, they decided that.
Well, a lot of them quit, so they go to work.
Right, and I think you didn't. You actually you quit school too
Right.
and started working. Tell us some about your jobs, your first jobs that you had.
Now, my first job was just a babysitting job.
Right.
And then I worked at a candy factory. And then I had like an office job.
The candy factory. Tell us about the candy. I think Pokey worked there with you, didn't she?
Yeah.
What did you guys make? What did you guys do while you were there?
Well, I don't know what her job was. I know what mine was. I used to, where they make the chocolate covered or peanut custers that had the creams on the inside.
Right.
I had a job where those creams come down a chute and you had this tray like this and you had to catch them things and you had to make sure you done it fast so they didn't get gobbed together.
How long did you work there?
I think I probably worked there about a year.
Okay, neat. That's great.
In the summertime, then we made like the gum candies that's got the icing on them. Mm-hmm. But some of them worked on, where they worked on, made the peanut clusters. You had those centers. When I caught them, well, then they put them on this belt that had the chocolate comes on it and the peanuts. And I remember they had candy bars where they put it in there to melt.
Yeah.
Them things was huge. They were like this, and like tremendous. A regular candy bar nowadays, it was like 6 times what a candy bar is.
Wow.
And whenever they would break that up, then they always gave us, if there was chips of it. But the peanuts would clog up at the bin where they went through, and they used to give those to us because the clusters was supposed to have the cream in it, so couldn't use just the peanuts.
Sure.
And they always furnished lunch because there was no place around to go to. So they always had, every day they had the soup and a sandwich.
Okay.
And I don't remember whether we got charged for that or if that was just a benefit. And I had never ate green pea soup until on Mondays was always green pea soup and ham salad sandwiches.
Okay.
And I liked it. I still like it today, but nobody else that I know likes it.
And you worked there, and I think you said you made enough money that you bought your own television set, and you're 18 years old.
Right.
And how do you remember how much that TV was? How much was the TV back then?
I have no idea.
Yeah, okay. I don't know if it was $25, $50, something like that, but it would have been relevant to what TVs are today. So, but and then of course we didn't have in our houses, we didn't have all that kind of stuff in the house. But Grandma, what are some of the trends, some of the things that people wore back then? What were some of the styles, clothing, hairstyles, some of the things?
Well, I think the older women, they probably wore most of their hair up.
Right.
And I know the older women, when they went to church or went someplace, they always wore hats. I never wore hats.
What are some of the?
And the girls in school, you was in the know if you wore Spalding shoes. They're just black and white shoes, but they were expensive, and we never could afford them.
But you had shoes that were similar. I think you said. Tell us the story about those shoes.
Mom bought us a pair of shoes. I think they were pink and white
For Easter.
And somebody picked us up in a pickup truck, and my sister and I drug our toes of our shoes on the pavement, and it wore the sole part off up to the thread where they were sewed together. But we had to wear them that way because Mom couldn't afford to buy another pair of shoes.
Right, and I think that's something that's common that all the way through. Kids are always tearing up shoes. I thought that was a neat story that you did the same thing. So did you get in trouble a lot, or were you in trouble just a little? Were you a great kid? Were you ornery?
I guess I was okay. Pokey was sassy, but
What are some of the? Oh, I know. What are some of the punishments that you were given as a kid if you did wrong?
well, basically for one reason or another, I wasn't allowed to be manually punished. So
Right.
my stepdad would make us recite Bible verses,
Right.
And one time he made it, because Pokey and I argued, he made us sit and face each other until we told each other we loved each other.
Right.
That was miserable.
And you had to say it like you meant it, I guess, probably too. So you probably had to say it like you meant it as well.
Yeah.
So what type of music? Do you remember what kind of music your parents listened to on the radio at all, or?
No.
And you told me that, I think, and then when you became like a teenager, what was popular music at the time?
Well, they had other music, but I only listened to country music.
So you listen to country music. What was some of your favorite bands or groups or singers back then?
Well, I liked Ray Price and
Hank Williams, like you said.
yeah, Hank Williams. I didn't like his son, but I liked him.
Not Hank Williams Jr., Hank
Yeah.
Williams, the old Hank Williams.
And Ray Stevens, I think that's his name. And
Loretta Lynn.
yeah,
Back
Loretta
in.
Lynn.
But Patsy Cline, you didn't like?
I'm not so much. Patsy Cline was a little bit above me yet. But when I was older, I really had a big crush on a country singer. Oh, what was his name now? I forgot. Billy Crash Craddock.
Billy Crash Craddock.
I used to go to his concerts every year. I probably was in my 40s, and a couple of girls from work, and we always went down there. And because we went to see Conway Twitty and Loretta Lynn, and then he was always a third person that was on their thing. And when you get in line for an autograph, then one of the other girls told him, said, Billy, why don't you lay one on her? So he kissed me.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, Billy Crash Craddock kissed you, huh?
Yeah.
Wow.
He's not around here anymore. I don't know whether he sings anymore or not.
Huh.
But
I have to look
he's
him up.
more like a country rock.
Okay. Country rock, like a Kid Rock or something like that today, I guess. But
Because he always dressed like Elvis, and where he always sang the song "Rub It In, Rub It In." Well, he always brought a girl from the audience up, but he come around here for quite a while there. It was back in the '80s, I guess, but then all of a sudden he wasn't around here anymore.
Speaking of Elvis, you were around for the rise of Elvis. You know, you were a young.
I wasn't an Elvis fan though.
Wasn't a fan.
Not like my daughter is.
Okay, yeah. Of course, he was around for her too. But
I like his religious songs, but I don't like his regular songs.
Right. What are some? Do you remember any family traditions that you guys used to do as when you were kids? I know you said and what I mean is like you would go visit your Aunt Ruth and Uncle Tom.
Well, whenever it was a holiday, we always went to my Aunt Ruth's. We always had their picnic, or it was always in the summertime. In the wintertime, I don't remember going there. But
Tell them about how you got there. How you went, because they were in Whitehall area.
They lived out in Whitehall, and we rode the bus to the end of the bus line, and then there was a telephone booth there. So we had a thing set up that you put your dime in to make the telephone call, and you let it ring either 4 or 6 times, and then hang up. So Uncle Tom knew that we was there, but then we also got our money back.
Right.
Because if he didn't answer the phone, well, then the money come back out to us.
Sure.
And
there was a little signal. You couldn't just text him and tell him, "Hey, we're here."
Well, we didn't have telephones like that.
Right. But that's where that's where the family gatherings were. And when I say family gatherings, that's all the Bellamy's. Your mother
Right.
And how many sisters? She had 4 sisters, I think, and 4 or 5
the
sisters.
brother
and a brother
was out in California, so he wasn't here. But
George.
most of the sisters was there.
And the sisters were Frances, Mary.
Well, now
Lucille,
I know Frances was
Hattie.
there. Lucille wasn't always there. She was there sometimes. Hattie was usually always there, and their kids.
And And that get together went on for many years,
Right.
on to where I was a kid, and my siblings and my generation went to those as when they were little, and you used to coordinate those get-togethers at what were we at Slate Run Park, I
Well,
think.
we
and-
had it at different state parks, but the last few we had was at Slate Run.
Right, and we that was just a family get together. I think you would go there early in the morning to get the shelter
Yeah.
house, reserve it for
Couple
it.
of my granddaughters I would go over like 9 o'clock in the morning and wait until about noon when people started showing up.
Sure. So that was a family tradition that went on. What are some family recipes? What are some things that you can remember that you guys always ate, or something that? There's one particular recipe, the Bill stuff there.
Well, I guess my mom grew up with the Bill stuff, and basically that's just hamburger and kidney beans cooked together. And the way she told it was that it was during Depression times that they were going to make chili, and when they went to get the ingredients, all they had was the hamburger and the beans, and they fixed that and said that they just told the family it was because the grandpa his name was William, so it must have been my grandma's dad, and they said, well, we'll just call this Bill stuff,
Got it.
and that stayed with it.
Bill,
But then you always had to have fried potatoes along with it.
that sounds good.
And my mom had it with us growing, and then she passed it on to us, and I guess I passed it on with my kids.
Right. And Bill would have been your grandmother, Ethel Bellamy's.
Either her grandpa or her dad.
Yeah, her dad was William Tipton. So
Yeah.
William Tipton, Ethel Tipton Bellamy, your mother, Vivian, you. So that, yeah, your great grandmothers or grandfather. So that's a neat little tradition right there. One other thing too is your mother was always made cakes too, didn't she?
Yep.
She was known
she went to a cake decorating thing, her and Aunt Ruth did, and Aunt Ruth was okay, but hers was too plain. Mom could see a picture like in a magazine or something, and she could copy it.
Wow.
She really had like some artistic abilities.
So I remember some of my first birthday cakes, were she had made. They've been like a Winnie the Pooh head or something like that, that she made. So that's
she always sold them, at work.
neat.
And I remember one year, I don't know whether there was a minister that kind of turned crooked. It was Leroy Jones, and one of the ladies that worked with her went to that church, and she wanted a birthday cake for him. And I said, Mom, how could you make a cake for
A
him?
minister that went crooked, huh?
Well, he wound up in prison.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
I mean, he lived up
There's been a few.
Delaware, north of Columbus. He had a big church. Leroy Jenkins, not Leroy Jones.
Jenkins. Okay.
And he was pretty crooked.
Huh.
I don't know what they finally sent him to jail for. I don't know whether it was embezzling or what.
Sure.
But he served time in prison. I said, I remember my mom, I asked her when my dad was preaching and my mom played the piano in church, and I said, how did you do that with those girls? She said, you sat in the front row, and your dad carried a switch that he put on the side of the pulpit. And if you girls started moving, he reached over and got a hold of it, and you knew to behave yourself.
Grab that switch, huh?
And I would assume it probably was me because I was the older one.
Sure.
And I remember one time where people donated stuff to him, and he had this great big box of little bags of potato chips. And there was a school back behind us. When the school was out and the kids had to walk past our house, I gave all his potato chips away to kids as they come down the street. And Mom said he closed me in the closet for punishment for that. He didn't whip me, he put me in the closet.
Wow. Interesting.
No, I don't think it was very long, but I guess he didn't believe in whipping or anything. I don't remember ever that. And I don't remember doing that. I just remember them telling me that I done that.
Sure.
But I have a thing about riding elevators or being in a closed area. I don't know whether I got claustrophobia from that. And I said, well, maybe that was it.
Makes sense. We learn, we gain phobias and early in our childhoods when we develop our personalities and things. So, but I think you told me a story. You were skipping school one time.
Yeah, the only time I ever missed school was because I didn't have good grades in school, and this really, really old maid teacher said that if they was going to have an English test, and if we didn't pass it, we had to stay after school until we did pass it. And I only had so much time to get home, or my dad would be on to me. And I knew I wasn't going to pass it, so I didn't go to school. I went to my aunt's and spent the day. And when I went home, I told my mom what I'd done, and I told her I wasn't going back, that I was going to quit school.
Right. And that's when, what grade was that? At ninth grade, I think you said, right?
Yeah.
But that was very common, for the time period to do that and go back to work. Your dad lived on, until your 30s and said your stepdad kind of thing, and then he passed away, a strange way to pass away. You want to tell briefly about how he passed away, Otho Shaw?
Well, he got killed in 70. He was hit and run. He was crossing the street and somebody hit him and didn't stop.
Didn't stop. And I think, how did you find out? You found out on?
Well, I found out over the TV, because at that time the dispatch was on strike.
Right.
And the news come on the TV. In a program I was watching, they interrupt the program and put on that after 3 days that they finally had identified the person that was hit.
Sure.
And it was his name.
So fast forward in a little bit, and was there anything else about your childhood, you like as a girl or a little girl, or your childhood you want to talk about, or what's something that was a big? I think you said you all the time went to church.
Yeah, that basically was about the only thing we was allowed to do.
Go to church. I think you were a counselor at a church camp.
Oh, when I was 15, probably when I was 14, I went to camp for the first time, and then the next year I went as a junior counselor, because I knew I was 15 when I done that. And I loved that, because I was away from home, and they had a lake, and I'd take a boat out and go out there and read on that boat, and got the worst sunburns because it was real cloudy, and I didn't know you could get a sunburn when it was cloudy, but you do.
I don't know, but all by yourself, I guess.
Yeah.
And you've always been a reader.
Right.
You've always been a reader. My whole life, always had a book in your pocketbook over there. So.
Well, I guess that's how you travel to different things. You can't afford them, so that's where your fantasy is. You read the books about things.
Wonderful. Wonderful story. Kids today don't know how to do that. They've got all their entertainment right in front of them. And I think that you told me a story one time about your grandfather, Bun Bellamy, taking you to camp also?
Well, he took me to Circleville, to the church camp there. I vaguely remember us riding a Greyhound bus down there. And then we walked 2 or 3 blocks down to where the camp meeting was.
Sure.
And I probably was about 15 or 16, something like that, but I just vaguely remember that. I may have even been younger than that. But
sure. Been the first time.
Why he happened to take me, I really don't know.
And you ended up living there and working there every day, but you didn't know that at the time. Are there any world events that you can remember, like when you were a kid? Do you remember the ending of World War II? Do you remember the Korean War? Do you remember certain presidents getting elected? Cold War.
Roosevelt, I guess, was when he passed away. I think it was kind of big news. And other than that, I don't. I wasn't into news that much.
Politics.
And because we didn't have TV, you don't pay, it's not part of your life. It probably was the adults, but not the kids.
Sure. So then in the 50s, you became a mother yourself, and how many children do you have?
5.
5 children, and their names are?
Russell, Barbara, Dan, Dennis, and Tim.
Okay.
And Tim, who has passed away.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, my Uncle Tim. Which one of those children are your favorites?
None of them.
None of them.
I mean, they're all my favorites. I don't have no pick on any of them.
Is that what they think too, or?
No, they don't. My oldest son thinks he's the number one, and my third child, he thinks he's the number one.
Tell us some stories about those two guys. I know you have two other sons, but
Well, I never could leave them alone together. If I went someplace, I either had to take one of them with me or make sure one of them was going someplace, because they both thought they ruled the roost. And
surely not.
And
this is my dad, Russ, and my Uncle Dan. So.
And I guess Russ would try to think he was the boss of everybody, and Dan wasn't going to take orders from him.
So, and then what about Barbara? Where was she at in all these things?
No, she was there at the house. Her and Dennis was pretty well good buddies growing up.
Right.
Dennis was more like a bookworm, and Barbara was too.
Sure.
The others just done it, to get by.
I know that of course when the kids were young and in elementary school, they of course lived in Columbus, but then you ended up moving out here to the country.
Well, we moved to the country in 63, 64, 66.
66.
And Tim wasn't in school yet, and the others was like in the first grade and the second grade, something like that. And the oldest one was graduating from junior high, and then Barb was just under him. But so biggest share of their school life was all down here.
Sure. Well, Dad would have been, if that was 66, Dad would have been about 10 or 11 years old, I guess, at that time. When.
Well, he was, I don't know whether they had the sixth grade then.
Right.
Because see, like now the middle school is 6, 7, and 8.
Sure.
But I'm not sure whether that's what was there, whether he was,
pretty sure
they had graduation, and that was the first that, Westfall was built over there.
And they went to Jackson Elementary, I think.
Right.
Do you know what? Do you want to tell people why you moved them out of Columbus at all, or?
So they didn't get killed.
Right. It was getting rough, is what you told me.
Well, there was some blacks that didn't get along with Daniel.
Right.
And about every day he'd come home and they were getting into a fight. I don't remember Russ so much.
That was a turbulent time.
Yeah.
It was a turbulent time the 60s were for that type of thing.
Well, Dan never backed down from no fight.
Right.
And I don't know whether he instigated any of them, but he never backed down. And so I figured when the opportunity the house was available, I thought that'd be the best thing in the world.
I think he told me he got jumped or something by 4 or 5.
Well, he did.
Yeah. So
it was just one particular boy. I mean, they just didn't, you got a kid that you clash. And
your sister had moved out here to Pickaway County with her husband, and then
her landlord had an 8-room house. And where we had so little furniture when we moved in, if you talked in the rooms, your voice echoed. And the first Christmas we was down there, the kids went out and cut their own tree down. And the ceilings was 10 foot, but they had to cut off quite a bit of it because we couldn't get it in the door.
Wow.
And when they finally did get it to where it would fit, I could only decorate the front of it because I didn't have enough decorations for it.
And this was an old farmhouse that had a bunch of rooms and things.
It did have a bathroom in it, though.
Right.
Because I wouldn't have moved in it if it didn't have a bathroom.
It had an old coal furnace, I think you said.
Yeah, it had a coal furnace. And we had to learn how to do to make the fire last through the night. Otherwise, you got up in the morning, it was pretty cold.
Sure. It was, how old do you think that house was? Do you think it was built like late 1800s probably?
No,
or
I have no idea.
The houses that you're describing to me, I know they're generally built in the late 1800s to the early 1900s, but I remember the house. It was
a nice house.
Yeah. There was a pond there, and
well, the ponds wasn't supposed to be used to us. But the kids did, go, as they got older, went back and fished, and
Right.
they didn't swim in it, but maybe they did. I don't know. But
This house is after you go outside of Darbyville. The Nazarene Church is there on your right. You go up right out of town, up the hill, and it's right there on your left.
yeah,
Is where that house is, and
and it's tore down now.
Right, Fearson Pike, I think, that is right there. That dead ends into Westfall High School right there. So those people in the future, that's where that house was.
See, on the kitchen part, it had a door on this side, and then on the other side, there was still a door that went on the back porch. And when it was real snowy, then we used to, if we see somebody coming up the hill, we'd watch out the one side of the door, and then we'd go to the other door to make sure that the people made it up the hill. If we didn't see them come up, then the kids went out to see if they needed some help.
Sure. So you were in your mid-30s, I guess, when you moved out to the country. So you've lived more of your life, but quite a bit more than your life here in Pickaway County.
Well, I didn't learn to drive till I was 40-some years old. And my neighbor, with her 2 kids, and then I had Tim, took me out on the road to learn to drive. And she said she didn't know which was worse, riding with her husband, who was a fast driver, or me, because I creaked.
Okay.
And,
your kids were pretty calm kids. They were never in trouble or anything like that?
No, not that I know of.
They're pretty. They
were pretty wild at home.
That's what I'm getting at here. It's kind of thing. Tell us a couple stories about that. So.
Well, they ain't really
just wild boys.
Well, I know one time I went to the store and I'd left the kids home, and when I come back, Tim had a big gash in his forehead where the boys had been out. It was a double cut axe, and they were chopping wood while he was taking his turn of doing it. And where he hit a hard spot in the wood, and it bounced back and hit him in the forehead.
How old was he?
Probably about 5 or 6.
About 5 or 6 years old. He busted himself in the head with an axe. Mm-hmm. And that's the thing that I take from the stories of my dad and my uncles, and not Barbara, because they said she was always away from them hoodlums, but is all the injuries that they had. These wild. Tell us about some of the injuries that they had.
Well, Dan, it was on a Sunday morning. They didn't want to go to church, so I let them stay home. And when I come home, they said, my daughter said he kept throwing up, and I just thought he had the flu. Well, then he was telling me that he'd been riding a horse, and the horse ran into him, and his shoulder hit him in the eye. Well, then I realized there was something serious wrong, so I took him to the emergency room, and he had a blowout fracture to his eye.
Yeah, right
and,
here.
Well, the plate that your eye sits in was cracked, and the muscle for your eye was caught down in it.
Oh,
and
so it literally broke his face.
So I had to take him up to Children's, and he had to have, I don't think it was emergency surgery, but he had to have surgery to replace that. And it didn't take, so he had to have it redone. And he was up at OSU the second time. But then after that, he was okay.
There were some other injuries some wild injuries, I think, that the kids had.
No, I don't know too much other.
Dad broke his wrist.
Well, your dad, when your dad was 5, he fell and broke his wrist and had a cast on it, and your teacher thought he was doing so great learning how, write with his left hand. And I told her, well, he's left-handed. That's why he's doing so good.
No kidding, right?
And apparently she didn't realize that, so I don't know whether it was close in the school year. And I guess one time Barbara got her heel caught in the spokes on the bike, and it cut through her shoe and her sock. And
oh my gosh!
She had to have a whole lot of stitches on her heel.
And remember something about Dennis's ear?
Well, we was at the country jamboree, and he fell on a picnic table and about cut his ear off.
Oh my gosh!
And we had to leave. It was out in Reynoldsburg, but the first hospital then was out in East Columbus. It was called Liberty or something like that. It it was more or less a hospital people didn't go to.
Right.
But it was the closest one that we come to, and so he had to have his ear sewed back on, but I guess it was okay after that.
Going back to Dan's injury with the horse, I think he said the horse stopped and threw him off, and he was looking, and the other horse came and hit him with its shoulder right in the face.
He fell off of it because they was riding bareback. They were work horses
racing,
and they were riding bareback. But he wasn't supposed to have went down to the neighbor's house, which he did, and they were riding it down in the bottoms where we lived, and then he just fell off of it. And then the other one was so close behind him, he couldn't get out of the way fast enough.
Right. You took him to Berger, and they told him he needed to go to Children's. And how did you get to Children's Hospital from Berger?
Well, back then they didn't have ambulances. The funeral homes supplied, well, I called it the hearse, but it really was an ambulance.
Okay.
And
so you put him in the back of a hearse.
They put him in there, and then I sat in the front, and that's why I said I was shocked, because they were driving up 23, and I looked over and I saw he was going 100 miles. But it didn't feel like it in the car that she was driving fast. But he didn't put his sirens on until he got to where so there was traffic, and then he'd put the siren on and then pull around the median thing and then back out on the highway.
What a scary time at the time. We're laughing now, or I'm laughing, but it was a scary time for sure.
Yeah.
Then when that happened. So, anything else from your kids' time period when they were young? They were good kids. I know they played sports and were active. And Barbara was in the band, and Dennis was.
Well, Dennis got hit square at the mouth playing baseball, and I didn't think, or Little League, and I didn't think he would ever play again. But he did. He went back, and I think they played until they were 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
And that was good time. I mean, we done that, and.
But those Carson kids were known at Westfall, I guess.
Yeah.
One after another, almost there for a little while, every other year. So.
Well, Dennis and Dan weren't in the same grade. They were a grade apart.
Right.
But Dennis was always what you called the good kid at school. And Dan was always, daredevil or whatever.
Right.
And I know the principal one time said,
who's a pilot now.
I had to have Dennis in the office today that he was doing this. And I said, are you sure you had Dennis or did you have Dan? And then he reclouded and said, yeah, I think it was Dan. And Tim was another one. He wouldn't back down. If somebody tried to accuse him of something, because they one time their school, when they was in the 4th or 5th grade, they went on a bus trip, a field trip, and some of the boys had, I don't know what they had on the bus. I don't know whether they had cigarettes or something. Anyhow, he was sitting where they were, and he got accused of doing that too. And he said, no, he did not do that.
Right.
And the principal at that time took their stories. Well, then they called the superintendent of the school in, and the superintendent was, giving them all a punishment, and they was giving Tim one. And I guess Tim just told him, I did not do that, and I'm not taking your punishment. And he got up and walked out. And I remember the principal telling me, she said, I just couldn't get over that. And so I don't know whether he ever got the punishment or not. I don't remember. I just remember all that going on.
Wild stuff. And they all and what's amazing is that they all became good family people, had families of their own and done really well for themselves. All 5 of your children have done really well. So that's definitely commendable for you as a mother to them. And that's why everybody thinks that you're a saint, kind of thing. So, but everybody holds you in incredibly high regard, of course. And how many of us are there, Grandma? There's how many? It keeps growing. That's why.
I forget how many grandchildren.
Right.
I've got 18 great-grandchildren, along with Well, total 29. I don't know whether the 29 is the grandchildren and the great-grandchildren together, but when the last one was born this year, that was 18 of the blood ones.
Right.
And then I think I've got 7 of step-grandchildren.
Sure.
And then to make up the 29, I think the rest of them is just the grandchildren.
So you got, of course, my dad was the oldest, and Russ, and he had 3 kids, and my
Dan
mom,
had 3 kids.
Barb has one.
Tim's, Barb's got 1, and Tim had, well, he had 2 blood ones and 1 stepchild.
Right.
And Dennis didn't have. The only thing Dennis has got is a
Stepkids.
he's got 2 stepsons, and then he's got 4 step-grandchildren.
Right. Then from that, like my parents have 10 grandkids. So, I have 3, my brother has 2, and my sister has 5. That's 10. And then Barbara has a granddaughter of her own and a lot of step-grandchildren.
But we didn't have any more girls in the family until this past, well, I think Addie was born, and then Charlotte was born.
Right.
And, well, Jennifer had her triplets.
Right.
And I think that was the first that we had girls back in the, that was 3 years ago.
Of your great-grandchildren.
Of the generation, because they're all boys.
Right.
Well, because I had Barbara or not Barbara, Dina and Jennifer was the only girls in the grandchildren. The rest of them was boys.
Right.
And then when the great ones come along, it was all boys until Jennifer had her girls.
Sure. Except for my 2, my oldest, but they're older.
Well, that's right.
But they're older.
Yours was the grandchildren. Hers was the great-grandchildren.
Mine are your great-grandchildren.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
They're just older than the other ones. They're so much older because they're almost like a generation.
Them, until Jennifer's was born, it was all boys.
Right, and that's
so
15-year stretch.
They were in their late teens when those
13.
when the triplets was born.
Sure, and you're old enough now. You could be a great-grandmother. So hopefully, my daughter is almost 22, Rebecca. So and Sarah's 19. So they hope hopefully you'll be here for another 30 years, Grandma, and be a great-grandmother. So what does it mean to you to have such a legacy of all of us? We're all here because of you. How does that make you feel?
I just think it's great to have that many family. I'm just sorry that we don't get to me, it's like, yes, they're my family, but they're also strangers because I don't know anything about them. I don't know their family style. I don't know what, because they come up with the electric thing, the iPad, I hook with that, and then I can pick up information there or pictures of the kids because like the Jen's kids, I never see them.
Right.
And, where everybody lives far away, and I don't drive now.
We're definitely spread out.
No distance.
We're in many states, aren't we?
And so that's how I keep in contact with them, but it's not, I don't think about them. And I think it's wonderful, to see these little ones, coming up. That's why I said, I know I'm at the age when you look in the paper at the obituaries that most of them are 85, 86, something like that, are passing away. So I know I'm not going to live forever. And I would like to see these little ones, to grow up in their teenage years to see what they're going to be doing. But I know I probably won't.
I don't know, Grandma. You seem pretty healthy, and what's wonderful is that your mind's sharp as it was,
well,
forever.
It's not all the time.
Do you have any? What are your biggest? Do you have any regrets that as a girl growing up that I wish I wanted to be a pilot or something like that? Is there any things that regrets that you have for the future or from your past?
Well, I just wished I could have provided a better lifestyle.
I think that's all parents, though, isn't it? I mean, all parents feel like that
because we were very poor raising them, but we made it.
And it's amazing, like I said, your children have all been successful. They've all are
Yeah,
pretty
they've
educated
all
and
done great. Most of them all own their own homes. The only one that didn't own their home was Tim.
right. But they're all pretty educated and
Yeah.
have lived productive lives.
They've all went to college.
Right.
They didn't all get a master's, but they've all
Right.
went to college.
Right, and your grandkids are doing very well. I mean,
Right.
the older ones, kind of thing, and we've all of us are, none of us are broke it rich yet or famous yet, but we've all done very well and contribute to society well, and that definitely is because of you,
Right.
kind of thing. Because we could have been prison rats, I guess, kind
Well,
of thing.
see,
But
they didn't follow my style because I didn't graduate from high school, and when I started to work back in the 40s, they offered the GED to us, and I passed that. And
Right.
so I got my GED. But
so one thing too, Grandma, is that you worked a long time too for where you retired. You want to talk a little bit about your job that you worked at?
well, I worked for a social service agency that almost closed down. It was a community action,
Yes.
and
What was it called?
it was called Pickaway County Community Action.
Short was.
And the people that had it before done some crooked stuff, so the government almost shut it down.
Yeah.
And they kept it together. There was 10 women that worked there, and the lady that acted as the supervisor until our boss was hired, she was one of the 10. Mm-hmm. And I remember when my boss, he was only a couple years out of college when he was hired, and see, eventually he would have us try to go out to the community. You went door to door and done a survey with the people to see what their needs was, so that he could write a program to the government. Well, we need this in this county, and eventually I think he was there late 70s until 2000, mm-hmm. and it had expanded pretty good then.
Right.
And it's still in operation.
It's called PICA.
Right. And I worked for maybe the first 3 or 4 years, we done the going out every day, and we could go out by 9, and we weren't really expected back until 4.
Right.
And my job was always this part of the county, so I knew my roads and everything out this way. But I always carried a map with me, so if I got lost, I could look on that map. But the houses didn't have addresses then. It was just a route something.
Right.
And then when they had what they called the Home Energy Assistance Program, I was the director of that program for 5-6 years. And then the last 15, 16 years I was there, I switched over as a dispatcher for their transportation mm-hmm. department. And I loved doing that. And it's where people called in for appointments to go to the doctor.
Sure.
And we transported some kids that was behavior problems. They had to go to a special school, and they contracted with us to pick them up. Right. Or there was kids with disabilities, and we took them. But I think we usually had about 10 drivers on each route that, each day, that some of them was retired and they only worked a half a day.
Yeah. I know you were proud of working there. You've worked there how many years?
I worked there 30 years.
30 years. And of course you got your plaques, a home on the wall, and
right.
And you retired from there. And that was your friends. Those were your people you ran around besides
they
people
were
at
like
church.
My family.
Right. And you still are in communication with
but most
many
of
those
them
people.
The ones I was the closest to, it's all passed away except for 1 or 2.
Right. And you guys always had a float in the pumpkin show, and then all of us grandkids, or not all of us, but most of us
Back in
went in
the 80s,
it.
we done what they called Toys for Tots, and we collected toys. And that's why I was telling my granddaughter the other day that the first year we done it, that we made doll clothes for the dolls and redressed the dolls, and got trucks that in cars and painted them and just made a big deal. It was like a family thing.
Sure.
And our boss was like a big kid because they had a scooter and they used to run up and down the hall on the scooters. But I said it was so disappointing because the parents would come and pick up this bag of toys that you had for them, and we wrapped everything. But it was on the second floor, and by the time when we go home from work, there would be these wrappings where people had wrapped stuff going down the steps and had it. It was all over the place. It was a mess.
I remember those steps. That building. What was that building originally? Was it a theater? Was it a?
Well, they have a community theater on the third floor.
Big steps. You remember that?
Oh, yeah.
You go in. That was an old building, like late 1800s.
It's like a veterans thing because see, our offices, they had one office that had like marble, and it had names of servicemen engraved in those. And see, when they redecorated, they papered over those, and I guess they really got upset over that. But it's called Memorial Hall.
Okay.
But now they've made it more related to the vets and stuff like that.
I remember.
Because, see, the library was downstairs, and then our office was on the second floor, and then the third floor was where they had the community plays, and they still have them.
It was like an amphitheater or something in there.
It's called Roundtown Theater.
Okay, yeah, because I remember going through one of the closets and ended up in that. You know, and I wasn't supposed to, but of course.
And they had bats really bad up there because one of the girls used to have programs in after work for Alcoholic Anonymous, and she was showing a movie. She asked me to stay because she never liked to stay by herself. And while we had the movie where the lights was out, here these bats all come down and was flying around, and so we had to get out of there. Right. So after that, I guess they started, trying to seal it up so they couldn't get down there.
What's shift gears a little bit? What's one of your things that you're most proud about of your life? Because you've lived longer than most folks, so I know you've had a lot of accomplishments, and a lot of like everybody else, a lot of things that have not went your way. But what are you most proud about? I know I'm putting you on the spot here, but
no, I don't know. I guess just to know that my family all succeeded, and have good families, and because I see some others in our family that they're drug addicts and. Or one thing or another, they've been in this kind of trouble or that kind of trouble,
and your family has not.
My kids did not.
Right.
I'm not going to say they wasn't ever in trouble, but they just, they overcome whatever their trouble was.
So you're most proud of your family and what they have become. That's your biggest. That's your life achievement, I guess, kind of thing.
And I guess the one time this local paper come out and. They done stories, and that's when I was in the transportation, and they come and done a story on me, and they put me on the front page of the paper.
I remember.
And everyone said,
I have a copy.
Because I was above the fold, that made it was important.
Right.
So I didn't know anything about that.
Made it above the fold on the newspaper.
Right.
I was in the Marine Corps during that time. I remember that.
But that was pretty neat, because everybody... I just seem to be well liked in my, growing up.
I have no doubts.
And
what
my coworkers, it was like that was my second family.
Sure.
And because we grew up together, and more or less, as the agency grew, we grew too.
Sure.
And
what's something, and I'm putting you on the spot again here, but what is something that you would like to tell your descendants? Like I said, right now there's 40 some of us already, but as the years go on, and you see, I'm a genealogist, so I know that your 200 years from now, your seventh great grandchildren are going to see this video, and that is so awesome, I think. But because I couldn't even imagine having something like that of the past. But But what is something that you would want to tell your descendants, your great great grandchildren, your great great greats, your 4-time, 5th, 6-time greats?
Well, I would like to see them. I'm not really into politics or religion, but I would like to see each one of the families to get into church
Okay.
and raise their families in church.
Okay.
I tried raising mine, but I still think, they didn't all, as they got older, they didn't want to go anymore. And some of them are in church now and some of them aren't. Mm-hmm. And out of my mom's family, I'm the only one that's in church.
Right.
But I think it's because of my mom taking it, raising us that way. That's put that instinct in us that whether you went to church or not, you knew the right from wrong.
Right.
But I think that's important to have church part of your family.
And what sort of sage wisdom do you have, that you've lived your life and you're smarter than all of us and have more life experiences? Is there anything that comes to mind that, hey, make sure you do this, do that, stay out of this, don't get involved in that? Or is there any, and it could be anything, what to eat, what to wear, what to do every day?
Be loyal to each other.
Okay.
And try to have communication to each other.
Okay, so be loyal to your family or to...
Well, be loyal to your family and try to have communication, but also whoever you work with, try to be friends to them. Don't pull shenanigans and stuff like that. And just be honest with yourself, Live your style to where you can live with yourself. Don't do things that's crooked or whether I always done right or not, I always tried to initiate that with my kids, and I'm sure they passed that on, to their kids.
Well, to us, us grandkids, you are perfect, and you are the one that we all look up to. And
I'm not always.
But
I've had bad things that I've done in my life too.
But we weren't here for that.
Right, true.
We weren't here for that. So to us, you are the epitome of saintlyhood. You are the greatest woman that we know. We've ever known.
Well, I think once I moved to the country, it was like I lived a different life.
Right.
And because when we lived in the city, it was like hectic all the time, and it was just so peaceful and. It was a struggle, but it was so much different living in the country than what it was living in the city.
And I remember, to myself saying, man, I've never heard my grandmother say anything bad about anybody. I've never, that kind of thing. And as I've grown, I've looked up to you that, well, what would my grandma think about that?
Yeah.
Things that come out of my mouth. If I'm going to put something on Facebook, what would my grandmother think about me putting this out there? So that's the influence that you've had on us, and I know that that's quite a positive. We hold you in high regard and think highly about who you are, and you've given a great example to all of us on how to be.
Well, I don't care. I don't discuss politics with anybody. I'm registered Democrat, but I vote whoever I think is a good person.
Right.
I'm not a Trump person, but it's not because he's Republican.
Grandma, don't go too far.
That has nothing to do with it. I didn't like him before he ever became a president.
Right.
And
to edit this crap
and
out.
It hasn't changed. but other than that, But that's what I try to, because Charlotte, everybody in our family, I think, is for Trump, and that's fine. And I think he's done a lot of good, but I still don't like him.
I understand. Yes, ma'am.
Because I didn't like him as a person when he had to have his show. It was
Apprentice or something like that.
Yeah.
So.
And I could not stand him. I think he's arrogant.
Right.
And he showed that, when he's been on the television and lose his temper, and I said, yes, you can do that, but you got to learn to control that when you're doing it in the public.
And we've done a good job as a family to not get too involved with that around one another, and because that definitely causes problems.
But I won't discuss, politics.
Right. Right.
I guess my grandpa and them was Democrats when they was growing up, and I think I was registered a Republican until one year some president was going to be Democrat, and I wanted to vote for him, so I had to change my party. So since then, I've left it. But I don't vote in the spring because there you have to vote strictly your party.
Right.
I always vote in the fall, and you can vote for either
Right.
party. And I always vote for who I feel is the best.
And I think that's the way most of American politics has been over the years, except for
Right.
recently, like in the Civil War time and recently. But that's a whole nother show,
Yeah.
I guess. But is there anything else that you'd like to add that you would like to tell about your life or plug into the video here? Or
No.
is there anything that you've laid awake thinking about that I wish you could know? And
No, it's just that, like I said, I love all these babies that's just been born recently,
There's a
and I
bunch.
pray for them every night that they're able to grow up and be good little, adults, and wish I could see them all, and get so excited when I see a picture of them, on the internet and see how much they've grown. And the only one really that I'm around much right now is Dina's little boy, Isaac. And
Sure.
I guess I've kind of got, attached to him.
Right. Because you see him all the time, and
And
he lives down the road.
they've got a little girl, and I said those two are as different as night and day. The little girl's like a little hellion, and the little boy was always so quiet, and she's just a complete opposite.
Right.
I mean, she's into this and she's into that, and that's why my granddaughter said if she had known kids were like she is when she had her first one, she wouldn't have had the second one.
Mm-hmm.
But Isaac was such a quiet baby. With Dina, who was too, her mom was,
Right.
when she was little.
Well, Dina's your favorite grandchild, though.
No,
Yes.
I,
Yes.
I don't have no favorites.
Grandma, come on. Come
No.
on. So, I don't have.
It's just that she's close. I mean,
Yes,
we
I
see
know.
each other
I
a
know.
lot.
We love you, Dina.
And I
So-
think because I raised her most of the time, I think
Sure.
she's closer to me than she is her mother.
Right. Right.
I mean, her mother was there, but her dad had custody of her, and her mom had opportunities to see her. She just didn't do it.
Sure.
Looking at your life as a parent, looking at raising 5 kids and having this giant family now.
Very hectic.
Yeah. What would if there was anything that you look back that you would absolutely change from your parenting style? What would that one thing be?
To be more patient with them, I guess, instead of losing my cool all the time and hollering at them. Try to sit down with them and be more of a counselor to them instead of, looking for the bad things. But they were pretty rambunctious too.
So for those of us that are, we still have a ways to go. Those of us youngins have a ways to go and to get to your age. While we're all still most of us are still in working time and in our careers, what would you say, looking back, is your advice for people like us?
Well, there again, I would say it's a shame that nowadays most parents usually have to work and kids are being raised in the daycares. And see, that helped a lot because I may have been on some public assistance, which I didn't like, but when I had babysitters and worked, they mistreated my children, so I had to choose to stay home until my kids were all in school. And I think that was a great thing, to be able to be with your kids, even though a lot of times we had a lot of frustration because of the age difference. But they seemed to adjust pretty well. That we didn't have a lot of money, but we tried to let them keep up and do things that they wanted to. But I would just say, be there for your children. If you can have a parent home with them so they don't have to be raised in a daycare. But I understand these days you have to. And even if you do, try when you come home, even though you're tired and you got chores at home, still find time to spend them with your children. And read to them, or, if they have something of interest, a ball game or whatever, take time to do that.
Only little once, right?
Huh?
They're only little once, right?
Right. Right. And you miss out on so much when they're in daycare. Now, see, like Dina, her children's growed up in daycare, but she had some good teachers that when they learned how, I don't know whether they do it so much with the little girl, but when Isaac was in daycare, when he learned to walk, they took pictures and sent it to her on the telephone. And when he accomplished something, they sent pictures and let her, be a part of that. And I've noticed she spent a lot of time with him. He's very hyper now. And she said, she don't know why he's like that. And I said, well, it's because he was an only child, and you and your husband both spent time with him and gave him a lot of attention. So now he expects, the attention, and they don't have the time for it. But they still try to, give him as much as they can. In the summertime, it's nice because he can get outside and run that energy off. But that's why she said, how did you handle your kids when they got like that? And I said, well, they played with each other. And, they had somebody to grow up with. So I think that's a big issue. But, you have some kids that require more attention than others do. But that's what I would say, is if you can, make sure you have time, because there's, like her sister, she worked, and when she came home, she felt like she was entitled to spend time for her evening, and her kids just done what they wanted to, and they, pretty well wrecked their house. You can leave that out if you want to, but that's basically what I'm comparing to.
Yeah.
You have to, as they're growing, because if you don't, the kids, as they get older, then their lifestyle is going to change to the bad things, not the good things. And it's good if they can be involved in, in groups with their, their age groups, or, like I said, my daughter was involved in the band, and my granddaughter was involved in the band, and it's stuff like that. It's not that much costly. It's time that you've got to put out. And some of the parents can't do that because where they work. It was just fortunate that I was able, by the time I got off work, a lot of times when they had band practice, I was able to go pick the kids up. And I usually had about 6 or 7 kids that I took and delivered home, because the other mothers, worked. Maybe some of the mothers would drop them off, or they've done this after school. But I think it's just important, and if they're interested in a sport, try to work it out where they can do that, because I think growing up with the sports helps them a lot. Don't push it on them, because when my boys played softball, they had mothers there that if their kids didn't get a home run, they really got scolded when it was over. Well, then that takes the fun out of it. It's supposed to be entertainment for them. Yes, you've got to follow rules from your coach, but I don't think you should be punished by your parents because you couldn't satisfy them.
So let's talk about the all these spouses, all the wives of all your children.
Well, so far I think we've been pretty lucky with the.
I was totally kidding. I was totally kidding.
Well, Grandma, thank you so much for spending your time with all of us to tell these stories that are going to be cherished by all of your descendants for many years. I know this is very important to me, myself and Chris, of course, that's producing the video here at Steady Ready. But we're so thankful that you took your time to share these with us. We're so thankful for the bazillions of meals that you've cooked for us, all the places that you've taken us, and all the love that you've shown us. And going to get a little emotional here, but I'll try not to. But we love you so much, and I know that I speak for everybody when I say that we all look at you as a saint, and you mean everything to us. And we're so happy you're in our lives, and we're so lucky to every day to keep you in our lives. So I wanted to tell you that, and tell you we love you and appreciate you so much, Grandma.
Okay.
So, okay. Hey, and remember, family tree nuts. Let our nuts find the nuts in your family tree.